Right. Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull Channel's Saturday stream. Just going to get started with some GeoGuessr as we continue our coverage of just not giving a fuck about the Jubilee. Let's see where we get dropped this time. Okay. Could be a lot of places, really. Hills and it looks like there was some hedgerow action in there. Could be Britain. No. It's France. Sauf ayant droit. Okay, so we are someplace in France. Tell a lot from a font. D40. The D40. This would tell me a lot more if I knew more about the numbering system in France. Oh wait, D46. What was that? D40? D500. Okay, D906. D498. D906, D30, D503, and there's A40, D529, D93, D94, D4100, D600, D900, tabarnak, c'est où la D40? NE D73, D3, D942, D2000, D8, okay, we're going to just move on a little bit and see if there aren't some more indications of where the hell we are. Since we so far have a route number that I can't seem to find on the map. And a lot of green to go by. I tend to think this must be the north of France. It just doesn't feel southern. Or north or central or something like that anyway. Oh, we've got an intersection coming up. Okay. Argières and Valeroy. Valeroy and Algiers. Farancourt D17. Okay, let's see if that helps us any. D148. D31. D175. With any luck, that's a branch line. D15. D177. Lots of D17 around here. Let's see if we can find just D17. Ambert. Wrong window. Okay, let's see. Argières, Valois. Never heard of any of these places. See if we get anything more out of this. Département de la Haute-Saône. Haute-Marne, Meuse, arbre. Sun was okay. No, pas de colis. That's better. Pas de colis again. Ardonne. Marne. Coteau, Saône. Okay. Saône et Loire. It must border on here. It's Rhône. Allier. Pays crétin. Jura. Come on. Did tools. Hold on. Lost the boundary. Come on, it's got to be around here somewhere. Okay. It's gonna have a punt. 233 kilometers. 4278, not a terrible start. Okay, we have scuffed infrastructure and palm trees. Transporte. Okay, that is most likely Spanish. Gimnasio Cartagena. Okay, that could be Colombia. There are lots of Cartagena though. Más que un colegio, una escuela de vida, felicidad y prosperidad. Cartagena International School. O sea, un colegio para un niño con plata, weón. A 50 metros. Okay. Ah, hell. Oh, come on. Okay, let's go the other way because that is just not working. This could be Colombia. I don't think it's Chile. There's also a Cartagena in Chile. Centro recreacional, La Hacienda, restaurante y piscina. Okay. I mean, resorts, I mean, it looks like it could be coastal. Clínica San Felipe de qué? Yeah, I can't read that. Too blurry. School zone. All I've only seen one Cartagena, which is the one in Colombia, and all I've seen of that is the outside of the airport. What does that say? Fotocopia, laminación, papelería. Pontezuela. Let's just see. Is there a place called Pontezuela near Cartagena? Mamonal, Esperanza, Zaragozilla, Canapote, El Pozón. Arizona. Another copy shop. Bayunca. That does not sound like a Chilean place name, so it's probably a different Cartagena. Or it's not Cartagena at all. That's also a possibility. Too blurry. Okay, Pontezuela is the actual name of the town. Unidad Afrodescendiente. Okay. That could be a lot. Major Afro-descendant communities in Venezuela, in Peru. A smaller one in Chile, but these are definitely, they just don't sound like Chilean names. Doesn't look like Chile. One thing, there's nothing advertising Cristal beer. And there's no high street in all of Chile that doesn't have at least one big green Cristal sign in front of a small restaurant or something, so it's not there. But that still leaves quite a few other places. Oh, wait, did I just go backwards? Must have done. Okay. So we're in Pontezuela, someplace. Don't think of it's Venezuela, so I'm thinking probably we're in Colombia. It's a small town, so it's going to be hard to find. Arjona. Oh, fuck, it was right by Cartagena. 4101, still. Not bad. Okay, someplace with lots of palm trees. Johor Bahru. Oh, Bahru. Okay. Okay. Well, that's easy enough. .4 kilometers. That's a little bit more like it. And now we're on 5. 4 of 5, and this looks North American. Okay. Wait, is that... Hold on. That could be 513, and if it is, I know exactly... Well, I know the general area it's in. Let's see what else we've got. Oh, hey, that'll be a town name. Troy, New York. Okay. So definitely not 513 then. I feel like I've heard of Troy, New York. Not sure exactly where it is, though. Troy. Oh, just outside Albany, is it? restaurant called Slidin' Dirty? I don't know that that's necessarily something. I mean, is that what you want associated with the place you're going for food? And an Italian restaurant called Red Front. Red Front. Okay, yeah, I need a street name or something. Fifth Avenue. Fifth Avenue. Fifth Avenue and what, though? And 111th. Wait, yeah, definitely 111th. A Street, 5th. Where the hell did 5th Avenue go? I had it a second ago. Ah, there we go. Washington, Liberty, Ferry. Jacob, Hutton, J, North, Hundred and First. Okay, here we go. 108th. Now, what was the point of origin? Okay. Oh, 518. Okay, no wonder it looked like 513. Absolutely no rhyme or reason to area code assignments in the U.S. And 112th. And 176 meters. $49.99. Not bad. I have a feeling we're back in France. Okay. Yeah, still thinking France. It's gonna be off someplace in the middle of nowhere. Oh, hold on. That was useless. Hey, Andromeda, how you doing? We're someplace in the middle of nowhere that I think is possibly France. But it isn't. It's Poland. Kazimierzów. Fuck knows where that is. Middle of nowhere in Poland is never easy. Łódź. See if we can find anything that narrows it down a bit. I feel like I might have been here before, actually. $104 kilometers. I actually wasn't too bad. Wasn't too far off with that. I knew it looked a little bit familiar. 23,023. Another 115 XP. How's your day been? Oh, yeah? What have you been up to? Ah, these things happen. Oh, cool. Well, I had an interesting start to my day today. I was having coffee, checking my After doing some chess exercises, I decided to check my my Twitter feed, see if there were any interesting notifications, and it turned out there rather was one. Somebody I know had drew my attention to the fact that a German journalist with a major media outlet, Miriam Fischer of Die Zeit, decided to just blatantly lie about me, and did it without actually... I mean, the only reason I would have even known that it happened was that Rashid tagged me into the thread. So that was quite a start to the day. Flirting sounds nice. Don't get anywhere near enough of that in my life lately. Hello, Phoenix. Miriam Fischer, a German journalist with a major media outlet, a major newspaper by the name of Die Zeit. Oh, your computer situation's been sorted out, has it? That is good to hear. Yeah, true. As much as I find Windows annoying, I have to use it because there's a lot of software I need for work that does not run on any other OS. Well, that's excellent. I'm glad for you. Trying to decide what video from the Reaction Fodder collection we should check out today. We've got, various bullshit from Aristocracy, who has been platformed by Vosh Limbaugh, because of course he has. Of course she has. We've got some PragerU stuff. Let's see. There's some... Okay, you missed... I was doing Xanderhole yesterday, where he was, where he accused, Sophie from Mars of lying and never got around to saying what the lie was. Interestingly, he did not at any time deny that it... See, because of what he was having a go at her for was that she pointed out that it was apparently Vosh supporters who got the trans suspended from Twitter. And very interestingly, he did not deny that. In fact, all he did was read the thread. It was just a short thread from Sophie, and then totally changed the subject, only came back to Sophie at all to call her a shithead. Yeah, exactly. So, that was yesterday. Okay. The last time we looked in on Aristocracy, she was low-key denying the Nakba. Oh, well, let's see what she has to say about J.K. Rowling. Yeah, exactly. He's just full of shit like that.
At the end of the day, like, the...
Okay. Is Harry Potter anti-Semitic? The J.K. Rowling accusations. I mean, okay. Is she going to acknowledge that J.K. Rowling is anti-Semitic? Because, I mean, the fucking goblins are pretty hardcore anti-Semitic shit. And in one of the movies, where the goblins play a major role, they made a point of showing the Star of David on the floor of the location that they had shot as, like, the home of the goblins. So, okay. Let's see if aristocracy will acknowledge that that's anti-Semitic, despite the fact that J.K. Rowling is pro-Israel to the extent that she was very anti-Corbyn.
The Harry Potter universe it's very British. It's everything about it is British. There's a reason why they would only hire British actors for it. And I just think it holds up a mirror to British society and to British history, and some things in that mirror are ugly.
Okay. I mean, but of course the thing is that a lot of the ugly things are things that she's in no way critical of. Well, I'm sort of withholding judgment there, because that sounds like she's saying that she's being critical about it. But, I mean, so much of it is just her sort of accepting that. I mean, it's like in her most recent movie, the one that completely bombed, where the bad guy is trying to stop the Holocaust from happening.
I don't know if you guys heard, but Emma Watson is apparently an anti-Semite. Now, Emma Watson doesn't actually run her own Instagram. She has someone who does that for her, but I'm sure she...
Okay, so we've started out with Emma Watson being anti-Semitic. That's interesting, because Emma Watson's big thing recently was just criticizing J.K. Rowling for her transphobia. Okay, so she has a Free Palestine meme posted on her Instagram, it looks like. So is she gonna just call that anti-Semitic, or what?
Planned it. Solidarity is a verb. Now, if you're looking at the sign, they're not actually holding up that sign. It is photoshopped on the front, which I take issue with the most out of this whole thing.
Why do you take issue with the fact that it's a meme?
Solidarity does not assume that our struggles are the same struggles, or that our pain is the same pain, or that our hope is the same future. Solidarity involves commitment and work, as well as the recognition that even if we do not have the same feelings or the same lives or the same bodies, we do live on common ground. I mean, there's some sus things in the photo that I don't like, but...
Oh, yes, like what sus things?
Overall, this really just seems like a pro-Palestine post. I mean...
Well, yes, it is. I mean, as evidenced by subtle clues like all the Free Palestine banners all over it.
There's a photo in the back. There's someone's holding a sign that says, "Hands off Jerusalem." That could be seen as, like, I guess, problematic, but they're probably talking about Sheikh Jarrah. Yeah, they are, actually. If you look at that, they're talking about Sheikh Jarrah, which is fine. You can't...
Oh, well, I'm glad we have her approval.
Be pro-Palestine and not want Israel wiped off the map.
Except the thing is, no... Okay, she uses this language, which is very dishonest, because there's a big difference between saying a state should not exist, for example, say an explicitly racist colonial state that exists on territory from which 750,000 people were kicked out in the first year of its existence, and indigenous people are still being kicked off the land. Yeah, I mean, I think that regime probably shouldn't exist. That doesn't mean that the people cease to exist. It means that some other form of social organization happens.
It's possible. I agree. Wanting Israel wiped off the map is an anti-Semitic position.
No, it isn't. What is, however, anti-Semitic is equating all Jews with Israel or with the Zionist movement. Most Jews in the world do not live in Israel, and in fact the tendency is for the proportion of Jews not living in Israel to go up, as progressive and leftist Jews in particular have been acquiring European passports, going back to their ancestral homelands, because it's just not a safe place to be a leftist at this point, even if you are Jewish and have a lot of relative privilege under the under the racist laws of the country.
But, like, she didn't say anything here that I would consider super anti-Semitic or even a dog whistle. Free Palestine can mean many different things to different people. So I'll be charitable and say that it means that she wants Palestinian self-determination and Palestinians to stop being oppressed and to live in peace, which I think we should all want. I doubt she knows too much about it. She probably just sees suffering and wants the suffering to end. And so
see, I love this. That's beautifully condescending from somebody who, the first time we met her, she was explaining that she doesn't know anything about the history of nationalism. Then the last time we saw her, she claimed that it was a controversy whether the Nakba happened. But she's going to stand in judgment of how much somebody else knows.
Sometimes it can be that simple. I mean, do I wish she would have posted something way more nuanced and complex? Yeah, but you're not going to get that from a celebrity. Then, J.K. Rowling was accused of anti-Semitism too. So,
yeah, but the difference is J.K. Rowling actually did anti-Semitism.
So all the right-wingers were saying Emma Watson's the anti-Semite. And then the more lefty folks are saying J.K. Rowling's the anti-Semite. Which,
yes, because J.K. Rowling actually has all sorts of fucked up caricatures of Jews in her books. See, that's actually anti-Semitic, because it's against Jews. Saying that Palestine should be free, that Palestinians should be free of this racist regime that is on their land. That's not anti-Semitic. That's just opposing the Zionist regime.
Which I found really interesting. I find that it's so rare that people genuinely care about anti-Semitism as an issue in and of itself. It feels so much more like a tactic or a stone to throw at the person you dislike. You don't like J.K. Rowling because of her alleged transphobia?
Her alleged transphobia? Her alleged transphobia?
Let's chuck that stone at her. You don't like Emma Watson because...
well, except that it isn't just... People aren't saying that she's anti-Semitic because of the transphobic shit she said. People are saying she's anti-Semitic because her books are full of characters of Jewish money goblins. And the bad guy in her most recent movie is trying to stop the Holocaust.
Because you're really bitter that she quit acting after Harry Potter? Or that she got Tom Felton? Chuck it at her. It's probably because she said something that was pro-Palestine. That was probably why they chucked it at her. There are total legit reasons to dislike J.K. Rowling. I mean, she did write one of the greatest books of all time.
Of course.
But she has said some pretty sus things about trans people. Actually, ContraPoints did probably one of the best takedowns of J.K. Rowling's views, and she also gave her empathy, which I think was really nicely taken, because I've always said that there are two different types of TERFs. And
well, I'm so glad that she's going to be nuanced about TERFs.
One is fixable and one is not. Just because, like, you dislike someone doesn't mean they're also guilty of something else. So let's hear what Jon Stewart has to say.
She did not, in a wizarding world, just throw Jews in there to run the fucking underground bank.
Jon Stewart has accused...
Well, yeah, I mean... And Jon Stewart is just pointing out something that a lot of people have pointed out. And it's really... See, this is one of the really big tells with Zionists. Because Zionists, Zionist ideology holds that it is actually pointless to fight anti-Semitism. That's the basic idea. That we shouldn't be trying to fight anti-Semitism because it's a natural phenomenon. It is a natural reaction to us Jews being where we don't belong. And the only way we're ever going to be rid of it is to just get the fuck out. That is the Zionist view. So we should always be a little bit fascinated when Zionists claim to care about anti-Semitism. And it's really interesting because what she's doing here is by no means atypical. This idea, like, you have, like, Zionists will happily defend Holocaust deniers if they're pro-Israel. Like, or, you know, say genocidal anti-Semites like the fucking white Christian fundamentalists who make up the overwhelming majority of the Zionist movement worldwide, and want to use Israel as sort of a holding pen so they can kill us in order for Jesus to come back so that he can give some sort of a fucking sermon about loving one's neighbor that by that point will be a little bit overdue. But, yeah. And Zionists will generally, when you point out actual fucking anti-Semitism, yeah, Zionists will be like, yeah, I don't see what's wrong with that. But if somebody says, you know, Palestinians should have equal rights and that includes the right of return, they fucking freak out. Like, look at the sheer... I mean, look how many Zionists, for example, are pointing out how fucking anti-Semitic Ukraine is at the moment. I mean, where they've got statues of a guy who murdered tens of thousands of Jews, and it's actually an offense to point that out about him. They actually have banned award-winning, internationally recognized history texts, academic history texts, just for acknowledging that Ukrainian fascists murdered a lot of Jews. But you do not hear the people who are constantly accusing people of anti-Semitism if they support Palestinian rights have absolutely nothing to say about that. Because that's actual anti-Semitism, and actual anti-Semitism they're sort of cool with because it makes Jews nervous. And it's become very clear that the only way to get Jews to consider actually moving to this colonial regime is if we're scared as shit and we feel the need to just get the hell out.
Accused author J.K. Rowling of dealing in anti-Semitic tropes in her Harry Potter franchise. However, a Jewish organization has come to her defense.
Let's see, which Jewish organization?
On a recent episode of his podcast, The Problem with Jon Stewart, the former Daily Show host called out the fantasy franchise's goblin banker characters as resembling Jewish caricatures.
You ever see the scenes in Gringotts Bank? And they're like, I love the scenes in Gringotts Bank. He's like, do you know what those folks that run the bank are? And they're like, what? And they're like, Jews.
Yes, they are. You could not make them. I mean, like, they literally took the time to show an top view in one of the movies so they could show a Star of David on the floor. I mean, that is fucking up there with that Ace of Base music video where they're talking about the woman who's gonna get you and is, like, basically they're calling her a parasite, and they keep on showing a Star of David necklace every time they talk about it. That's, like, up on that level. But okay, she's going to tell us why this isn't anti-Semitic.
How the goblins resemble an illustration in the 1903.
Not only that, but in the movie, there's literally a Jewish star in Gringotts that J.K. Rowling didn't write down. Like, it's not in the books or anything, but you can kind of see here, there's a Jewish star.
Yeah, they made it. See, this is what I'm talking about. They made a point of putting that in. That shot, I mean, this is editing. There are editors. They did not have to show that. They could have CGI'd it out if they wanted, or they could have shot around it. I mean, this is an actual place. This isn't a set. But there are a million ways you could not show that if you didn't want to show that. And instead, they decided to put that in there.
Are here. And, like, this is, like, the kind of... There's this old Jewish anti-Semitic caricature. They're usually short, like, hunchback. They really only care about money. And a little long, hooked nose. Like, this is what I would have to be coded as Jewish, all right? There's, like, a quote in Harry Potter where Hagrid is leading Harry Potter, like, through dingers, like, they're incredibly smart, but you never want to trust them.
Yeah, which is, again, I mean, that is, like, I mean, this is not exactly making this look less anti-Semitic. Just making sure the chat isn't constipated.
Sure, that is connected to Jewish stereotypes. Just too much of a coincidence. You know, to bring all of those traits together, especially with how similar they look.
Oh, is she gonna actually acknowledge that there's something to this?
And if you know anything, I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, so if you know anything about the traits of goblins, is that they always make deals that they know you're gonna get the worst of it. That was a huge old-style stereotype of, particularly a medieval stereotype of Jews. So there's tons of connections. But it's interesting, when I was reading Harry Potter, I never saw them as Jews.
Well, yeah.
You know, I literally just saw them as goblins, like these like weird figures. I didn't make that connection as a kid growing up, but I also didn't make a lot of connections. I didn't connect the story. I mean, the story of Harry Potter.
Yeah, you don't connect the Palestinian refugee problem to the Nakba. You're not really good at making the connections.
Is like very much the story of Jesus Christ. So I think it's fair as an adult to like look back and think, oh, this is where this idea comes from. You know, it's probably pretty problematic. I don't think anyone in China actually calls themselves Cho Chang. But at the end of
Well, in fact, that's a lot of Asian people have pointed out just how that's like a gag name, because those are two Korean surnames. Like, that isn't an actual... Apart from the fact that the character's just, like, the standard it's like a standard cookie-cutter stereotype Asian character, but the name isn't even an Asian name. That is... Cho is a Korean surname. Jang is a Korean surname. You put them together, and what you have is just fucking bullshit. That is not... that is not a name.
of the day, I still think Harry Potter is a classic book series, and I still think it's an excellent book series. I just think that it's very, very British, and
it's very, very British. Well, I mean, okay, yeah, I mean, it is pretty racist, so...
Inspired by British folklore. For example, Dumbledore, totally inspired by Merlin, one of the oldest characters in the early Middle Ages of Anglo-Saxon England. There's so many stories that go back.
Actually, that's not so much Anglo-Saxon as Welsh.
I mean, even the concept of witches go back to a lot of ideas about sexism. And
the concept of witches, that isn't like a specifically British thing. They have you find witches all over Europe, and not just there either.
A lot of these ideas have very problematic origins, to say the least. It's actually really interesting. They're always using Latin. And how does Latin get to the British Isles? Through colonialism and imperialism, right? I don't think J.K. Rowling...
Oh, see, this is interesting. Okay, so the pre-capitalist Roman invasion and occupation of Britain, she is happy to describe as colonialism and imperialism, even though there are all sorts of quibbles there, because it just doesn't work the same way. But she absolutely refuses to refer to the literal colonization of Palestine as colonialism and as an imperialism.
Was thinking, I want to make these mistrustful characters inspired by Jews, and then make them goblins. And then this way I can get away with my anti-Semitism. I don't think J.K. Rowling is any more anti-Semitic than the average person.
Oh, see, God, she was so fucking close. I was gonna have to hand it to her, and then okay, the average person does not, like, create a bunch of fucking Jewish banker goblins, though. The average person, that's the thing the average person actually does not do. She created that. That came from her mind, and it just happens to, like, to correspond very closely to, like, Nazi propaganda.
What I do think she was doing is I think she was inspired by the world around her, by the cultural literacy around her, by the tropes around her, and a lot of those tropes are based in anti-Semitism.
Yes, and see, and when you decide to just sort of uncritically use those tropes, that's anti-Semitic.
Britain as a whole does not like talking about its history of anti-Semitism. And British culture doesn't like talking about that.
What the fuck does she know about British culture, though?
Because they tried to really kind of frame themselves as being the anti-German nation in the mid-20th century and the early mid-20th century. But the truth is that anti-Semitism is very much at the core of old British mythology and cultural symbols.
Old British? What define old British?
There's a lot of nasty history that people don't like talking about.
I mean, that's true, there is. I mean, there was a fucking ban on, there was a royal edict actually kicking all the Jews out of Britain in the Middle Ages. and it was never, it was, I think it was only formally repealed a few years ago.
People love talking about when the Jews got kicked out of Spain, but the Jews had been kicked out of England 3 times before they were kicked out of Spain. People love talking about the massacres that happened, in Poland to Jews, but tons of massacres had been happening in Britain.
Actually, I mean, you can't really compare those two things. Yes, I mean, there's been a fair bit of anti-Semitic violence in Britain, particularly in the Middle Ages, and, up to a couple of centuries ago, and occasionally, but to a much lesser degree in the past 100, 200 years. That's true. But the thing is, there's a reason that Jews from Poland, from Central Europe in general, were fleeing to Britain. There's a reason, actually. The Jewish population of Britain is largely made up of the descendants of Central European Jewish refugees, and it's because actually the anti-Semitism and the anti-Semitic terror in those places was absolutely off the charts.
Have you guys ever heard of Edward the Hammer of the Scots? He's the bad guy in Braveheart. He's the bad king. Notice how he's called Hammer of the Scots, not Hammer of the Jews. Look him up. He was terrible to Jews. He was so notorious. Like, he would borrow money from Jews, right? Because at the time, Jews were one of the only groups that were allowed to lend money and charge interest and have it as a career, which is where the stereotype comes from. So he would borrow money for his wars against the Scots and the Irish, and then when he couldn't pay up, he would just kick them out and then use a bunch of anti-Semitic myths about like blood libel and that they're like, they're just trying to steal our children's bloods. And
oh, well, but I mean, so he's using the sort of anti-Semitic tropes that J.K. Rowling is using. But you're saying J.K. that doesn't make J.K. Rowling anti-Semitic, so I guess that doesn't make this fucking king anti-Semitic either. I mean, he's just using British folklore after all.
And all this shit. And so the ideas of goblins and elves, there's so much history of and that, of course, that anti-Semitic culture and propaganda seeps deep into British culture. I should probably say English culture, but there's also stuff that seeps into other areas of Britain.
Yeah, I mean, there was a pogrom in Merthyr Tydfil in Wales in the early 20th century.
So I'm just keeping it kind of broad, but it's definitely mostly focused on English. And people just don't like talking. It's so rare that I hear people talking about British and English anti-Semitism. And it's really interesting because I actually think it's very, very prevalent today. When you want to talk about it, people usually want to say, oh, well, it's because of the Muslim immigration. And it's like, bro, it existed there a long time ago.
Yeah, okay. And the reason that it's so convenient to sort of blame anti-Semitism on Muslims is because that sort of supports this idea that the actual anti-Semitism we should worry about is people opposing Zionism, opposing the colonization of Palestine. And so it's very convenient to make it all about Muslims rather than, say, people like J.K. Rowling.
It's always been there. And so at the end of the day, the Harry Potter universe it's very British. Everything about it is British. There's a reason why they would only hire British actors for it. And I just think it holds up a mirror to British society and to British history, and some things in that mirror are ugly. And I don't necessarily blame her for that.
Okay,
what I would
holding up a mirror. See, the thing about that is when you talk about holding up a mirror, you're actually trying to criticize those things, usually. But the thing is, she doesn't really criticize those aspects of society. She just sort of takes them for granted and, in fact, defends them. Like, she has, fucking slaves in her wizard world, and she actually she plays the idea that they should not be enslaved for laughs, and suggests that they're actually happy being enslaved. I mean, she isn't being critical. She's not being socially critical of anything. She's more or less, she's just kind of cool with how fucked up society is.
is I would blame her for her transphobia, not for this. I think, if anything, I think she should say, like, oh, like, you know, I probably should have been a little more careful with the goblins and Gringotts. A little much.
Yeah, and yet she hasn't. After people have pointed out how fucked up that whole thing is, that kind of says something.
You know? But yeah, I think that's why I wouldn't put a huge amount of hate of accusing her of anti-Semitism. So I actually think both her and Emma Watson are not guilty. No.
Not the same thing. Come on. All Emma Watson did was post a pro-Palestinian meme. There was absolutely nothing anti-Semitic about any of that. There was absolutely nothing problematic about any of that. That is not the same thing as making a fortune off of a series of books with big-nosed, dishonest goblin money, Jewish money goblins, and then, topping it off with a movie where the bad guy is Jewish and wants to just stop the Holocaust happening.
So Jon Stewart updated his Twitter, and he kind of said that, like, a lot of people were jumping on board his criticism, and
a lot of people were pointing it out well before he did, though.
He was just kind of talking off the cuff, saying it's funny, right? And he wasn't meaning it as a way to really shit on call J.K. Rowling anti-Semitic. And this is what he says
We
here.
are back. We are doing the podcast again.
Why is this in my left
We
ear?
had a lovely break. Lovely is probably overstating it. It was quarantine and a terrible, terrible pandemic.
That is correct.
Wreaking havoc. But before we get going, I have to address this.
I'm sorry, guys, for your left
This
ear.
is bonkers, guys. So if you remember, like a
It's
month
literally
ago,
leftist audio.
I recorded one of the podcasts with Henrik and Jay, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And we were bullshitting about all kinds of stuff. And we started talking about bar mitzvahs. And then Jay said something like he did a funny riff on it, like what chapter of Harry Potter was that? And we went off on a Harry Potter thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is no reasonable person that could have watched it and not seen it as a light-hearted conversation amongst colleagues and chums.
God, see, this is the thing about Jon Stewart. He will say something that he will actually take a fucking position on something and then walk it back immediately. Because the thing is, what he was pointing out was an anti-Semitic thing. He was pointing out an anti-Semitic thing.
Having a larf.
He was having a laugh about it, but what he was pointing out was an actual thing. So how's he gonna
Enjoying ourselves about Harry Potter and my experience watching it for the first time in a theater as a Jewish guy, and how some tropes are so embedded in society that they're basically invisible, even in a considered process like movie making, right?
See, I don't buy that because a lot of people, it was visible to a lot of people.
Absolutely.
Fuck, Jon Stewart stealing it right from my
We did that
mouth.
a month ago. So like 2 COVID mutations
Over
ago.
on me, I'm sorry.
Back when we were still in like beta world
See, it's
or
over.
whatever, wherever we were. This is a month ago. This morning I wake up, it's trending on Twitter, and here's the headline from Newsweek. Jon Stewart accuses J.K. Rowling of anti-Semitism.
And it's true, he did not actually... he just pointed out an anti-Semitic thing that J.K. Rowling did. So, yeah, you can quibble about that, but it just seems a little bit cowardly to back off, because he was literally... What he pointed out was fucking anti-Semitic. There's really no serious debate to be had about that. It was a major anti-Semitic trope, and it's all over our fucking books.
So let me just say this, like super clearly as I can. Can I get a close-up? All right.
You're in control of your own camera.
Bring your face
I'm in control of my close-ups. All right, let me do this.
Camera 1.
Hello, my name is Jon Stewart.
Hello,
I do
Ludlow.
not think J.K. Rowling is anti-Semitic. I did not accuse her of being anti-Semitic. I do not think that the Harry Potter movies are anti-Semitic. I really love the Harry Potter movies, probably too much for a gentleman of my considerable age.
God, Jesus, I mean, it's like, but it was, what, he has, I really liked him early on in his career in The Daily Show, but it's like, over the past, like, decade, he has decided to make not actually taking a position, just sort of sitting on the fence into some kind of an art form.
So I would just like to say that none of that is true, and not a reasonable person could not have looked at that conversation and not found it lighthearted. So let me say this instead to Newsweek.
So what I find interesting here is if he says that during this conversation it was so obvious that it was lighthearted, they were just poking jest at, like, you know, some of the tropes and stuff.
Yeah, but the thing is, I mean, you can be lighthearted and make jokes about things that are fucked up, and that doesn't mean that the things you're making jokes about aren't fucked up. I mean, that's a whole lot of comedy, is literally that thing, where, like, I mean, when I take the piss out of, say, Caleb Muppet and his fashy crew, yes, there is a certain amount of lightheartedness in the way I do it, but it is a serious fucking thing, and it is a serious problem that this sort of cult is taking shape, and we should pay attention to it. I mean, just saying, he's pointing out, I mean, like, he's pointing out these tropes, but he doesn't want to sort of take that, to the conclusion that is compelled by them.
And someone ran away with that immediately to start, like, to arm it. And it's so strange. So many of the people that I saw going crazy about J.K. Rowling and her so-called anti-Semitism in this case were people that...
Her so-called anti-Semitism, she was way more willing to entertain the idea that Emma Watson... that Emma Watson, for posting a pro-Palestinian meme, might be anti-Semitic. I mean, she ultimately magnanimously said, yeah, that she probably wasn't. And, you know, gave her fucking seal of approval. But, I mean, she isn't...
have just watched tons of other anti-Semitism skate by. Especially when it's useful politically. It's the exact same shit that
yeah, like what?
Seen with the Emma Watson thing. It's like, it feels so often like anti-Semitism, like people are mad.
The Emma Watson thing wasn't anti-Semitic.
Mad at J.K. Rowling for good reasons. And when you're mad at someone for good reasons, you want to just immediately jump at, well, we don't like her, so let's accuse her of something else.
No, see, people, the only reason that anti-Semitism is on anyone's radar when it comes to J.K. Rowling is that she's got fucking Jewish banker goblins in her fucking books.
Before we really think critically about it. I would love to talk to someone who thinks that she's a full anti-Semite. That's like, I've seen her, like, defend Jews on Twitter. I've seen her be, like, great with Jewish people.
No, she doesn't defend Jews. She opposes Palestinian rights. And she slagged off Jeremy Corbyn for having been a long-time supporter, albeit an extremely fucking milquetoast one, of Palestinian rights.
I think she has blind spots when it comes to trans people. I don't think Jews are one of them.
Blind spots.
The character of Goblin's 100% inspired by some anti-Semitic imagery and folklore. But the truth is that, like, I'm telling you that could have been written by a Jewish person themselves.
Yeah, that doesn't actually mean that it isn't anti-Semitic. I mean, there are Jews who write anti-Semitic shit. I mean, like, Gilad Atzmon is of Jewish descent, and he's a fucking Holocaust denier and a Nazi sympathizer. Paul Eisen, also of Jewish descent, Holocaust denier. There are lots of Jews who write anti-Semitic shit. Just like you can find pretty much anyone on the business end of any different kind of racism you can find somebody who's collaborating in it for, their own opportunistic reasons a lot of the time. That is just a thing. That isn't, like, something doesn't immediately be... Something that is anti-Semitic does not become not anti-Semitic because you find a Jew doing the same thing. It's either anti-Semitic or it's not anti-Semitic based on its own fucking merits.
And I can tell you that as a Jewish person, there's tons of anti-Semitic, our culture and our history, especially in the West. There's so much anti-Semitism that is so normalized. Jon Stewart is very, very right about this, that there's so much that even gets into us as Jewish people. And this works for so many other issues, right? How many trans people, I know I have a lot of trans viewers, how many trans people in this chat have internalized some transphobia? Because we live...
Yeah, but this isn't internalized anti-Semitism. She's not anti-Semitic against it. She's not Jewish.
Live in a very transphobic society. You would have to be a complete, robot to not internalize some of that transphobia. It's one of the reasons why some of the harshest transphobia I've seen is usually from other trans people. And this works for so many other minorities. We're so focused on condemning...
So, but wait a second, you just said that if Jewish people did this, that would... She could see it wasn't anti-Semitic, because she could see Jewish people doing the same thing.
Individuals that we don't like to think about the broader society and the broader narratives and culture that contribute to these ideas in our heads. And that's why it's not about identity. If someone accuses me of anti-Semitism...
well, which they would be right to do because she's a Zionist, and Zionism is an anti-Semitic ideology. And when she equates Jews and Israel and Zionism, as she did quite explicitly at the beginning of this video when she was trying to find a way to suggest that Emma Watson had a case to answer for anti-Semitism, that's anti-Semitism. That's anti-Semitic.
Slap me if I ever use "I'm Jewish" as a defense.
Yeah, you do that all the fucking time.
I'm telling you, slap me. Because it's never a defense.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Right? Identity is never a defense. Because it's so common with us, no matter what our identity is. It probably seems less dangerous, and I think that that's totally fair. But there is a history. There is a history of anti-Semitism within Jewish circles.
Yes, I mean, the Zionist movement is just a movement of internalized anti-Semitism. Although, actually, since the overwhelming majority of the Zionist movement isn't even Jewish, there are, just one Zionist organization in the U.S., Christians United for Israel, claims 80 million members. There are 14 million Jews on the planet. Not even all of us are Zionists. So, and according to polls, there are roughly 150 million Zionists in the U.S., so that's more than 10 Zionists for every Jew on the planet.
A history of, some of the people who really advocated against women's rights were women. We are sponges as human beings, and we are raised by, but we are raised with so many different cultural ideas, that get embedded in us, that, this is what unconscious bias is. And if we focus so much, I wish, instead of, just condemning people on Twitter and yelling at people and canceling people for, this, for unconscious bias, we instead...
I don't think this is unconscious, though. See, that's a question. The way you could find out is, how she's actually responded to that. Because if she says, holy shit, yeah, that actually is fucked up what I did, and I really probably shouldn't have done that, and goes on to make, the goblin, have a redemption arc for the goblins to actually, or something like that, to show that actually they're not that dodgy, and maybe they're not so fucking one-dimensional. But instead... There's this Harry Potter Legacy, or whatever the fuck it's called, video game, which was written, it turns out one of the head developers on it is, a Nazi, and it's, the whole story is just, an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory involving the Jewish money goblins trying to start a revolution. And if she's not anti-Semitic, if she honestly did not realize how fucked up these stereotypes are, then she might say that that's not something that she wants to put her name on. She hasn't.
Instead, look at the real culprit, which is society. which are systems and, and structures and cultural attitudes and histories. There's so much still within British culture and within, British history that is anti-Semitic.
What the fuck does she even know about British culture? Has she lived there? Does she know anything about it? I mean, she keeps on talking about things being very British, but she has not actually said how she would know. I can talk about it. I've spent a fair bit of time there. I know a lot of people from there. I'm actually pretty familiar with the way things are there. I follow the British media. I follow British politics. I've been involved in politics in Britain fairly heavily, to the extent that there's actually an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory about me amongst some TERFs in South Wales. They've decided that I somehow have these Svengali-esque powers that have turned the feminists in the area against them.
That it's very hard for me to look at someone like J.K. Rowling and get really mad at her, because I know that her stories were just inspired by the stuff that really already exists.
Well, the point is, what's problematic is exactly that it was stuff that already exists. Okay, and with that actually was very well timed. It is time for me to say good night. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm glad you did. Thank you, Phoenix, Ludlow, Andromeda. And, I may be back tomorrow afternoon. I've been starting to do more, early evenings streaming, both on this channel and on Hyperpolyglotting. So I may see you tomorrow, or I will definitely otherwise see you sometime this week on either of the channels, and I will be back Friday and Saturday between 11:30 p.m. and 1 a.m. Sorry, U.S. Eastern Time. Have a good night. Thank you for joining me.